You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Still guessing your way through training? Jumping between programs that promise fast results but never deliver? That ends now. When you commit to a full year of Power Athlete programming, we're including lifetime access to our nutrition protocols and a one-on-one consultation to build your game plan absolutely free. When you commit more, you get more. Every Power Athlete program is built on decades of experience training pros, operators, and people like you with lasting results. Forged by my time in the NFL, refined with PhDs and performance experts, and proven daily by a crew that's walked the same path you're on. No influence or BS, we exist to help you move better, perform better, and live stronger. If your goals change, no problem. Switch between any of our programs throughout the year, no extra cost. Go to powerathletehq.com/JanRes. Pick your program, then select athlete yearly at checkout. Don't sit on the sidelines, commit to yourself today. As much as I love having you on the podcast, I feel that doing this podcast that we're going to kind of talk about right now is extremely important, and something when you hit me up the other day that Art De Vany had passed away. That was, even though I didn't know him personally like you did, I felt the blow of that for the fact that reading Evolutionary Fitness and that essay that he wrote, and then obviously his book later, was so impactful upon me, and I know it was impactful upon you. And still to this day, I can see threads of that original piece and, you know, what he originally put forward in all of my stuff and your stuff. And I think, you know, we owe him a massive debt of gratitude. And, you know, he lived to be 89 years old, which is probably much older than you and I will live. And, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about him and, like, you know, discuss some of his most influential ideas and, like, the principles that really shifted your personal and professional approach to health and fitness and just wellness.
Yeah. You know, I've been working on a blog post, and a lot of it is trying to pull on the threads of, who did Art influence, and who might have not even been a player in any of this stuff, you know, had Art not done what he did. And for folks that don't know who Art De Vany is, there is actually a pretty good Wikipedia page that has a decent bio on him. I've grown to hate Wikipedia over time because it's anything about like Marxism, collectivism has been completely expunged off that. Like, you can't find the story of the Chankari tree from Cambodia anymore. Like, they've just like completely neutered anything around collectivism. But there's a good bio for Art. He was a professor emeritus of economics at UC Irvine, semi-pro baseball player for a time, and just this polymath, like really brilliant. And it's interesting. And I don't know if you fully know this backstory, but he got interested in all of this fitness and putting this evolutionary lens, and in particular his kind of stochastic randomized models of economics, because his first wife developed type 1 diabetes, and then one of his kids developed type 1 diabetes.
Why did I know that?
As you well know, if you want to become a half decent endocrinologist overnight, at least within insulin, glucagon, cortisol, and related pathways, you have a family member that develops type 1 diabetes and start managing it. And immediately, because the guy was brilliant and he just looked at, you know, what they were recommending, which even back in the day was eat whatever carbs you want because we're afraid of hypos, and then we'll cover it with insulin and we'll call it a day. And he started just seeing the impact of that on his wife, and he was like, this is garbage. And so he just pulled out the endocrinology books and started reading this stuff, and started looking at both the etiology of type 1 diabetes, like this underpinning of autoimmune, you know, kind of initiation, and how is that different from type 2 diabetes, because he really wasn't too sure. And okay, this one's insulin resistance. Well, that's interesting. One, he figured out a pretty good strategy for managing his wife and his son's type 1 diabetes, very similar to the Bernstein approach.
Yep.
But then he started asking some questions around like, whoa, what's up with this type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance? And he just went down this rabbit hole. And I believe he published his first essay online on his UC Irvine site, 1997, I want to say, is like the copyright of the earliest one that I had found. Or no, it was before that. It was 95 or 96, actually, because it was a couple of years that he was online before I found him. And after I had my ulcerative colitis health crisis kind of gig and had just started looking around for information on the paleo diet, I found a tiny bit from Lauren Cordain in the late 90s, 97, 98. He had a tiny little bit there. But Art was really the first biggest, search that you would get. And he had a fairly active, there was a message blog that was fairly active with him. And when I read that evolutionary fitness essay, it completely rocked my world. Like I just couldn't, it made so much sense. And there was so much information in 21 pages but it flowed, the stochastic approaches to things, emergence of things out of chaos and whatnot. Like it just totally blew my mind. And he had a little bit of material there, and every once in a while he would get interviewed by somebody. Like he was on the show Closer to Truth, which was like a PBS type show. That was pretty early on, but ever so often there would be a new little fragment. Like I would keep going back and looking for them and trying to find them. And this was maybe 2001. Yeah, it was 2001. And I found a new link to Art De Vany's evolutionary fitness discussion. And it was from this weird website called CrossFit. And that was literally how I found CrossFit.
Wow. Was
looking for more shit about Art De Vany.
Wow.
And they had a very complimentary, discussion about Art's approach to nutrition and fitness, completely consistent with the CrossFit model, blah, blah, blah. And again, this was 2001, like the blue screen, all that jive.
When you printed it out, it basically just printed out white.
Yeah. But I mean, as background, like that is literally how I plugged into CrossFit, was looking for material related to Art De Vany, and in their workout of the day, they would have something about Atkins every once in a while and whatnot. And not infrequently, they would have an update to Art, reminding people about Art De Vany and his approach and all that.
This episode of Power Athlete Radio is brought to you by the Business of Strength. Imagine making this your strongest business year yet, with more revenue, better systems, and a gym that practically runs itself. Sounds like a dream. But that's exactly what the Strongest Year Project delivers. It's a 12-month mastermind for gym owners, packed with one-on-one coaching, real-world systems, bi-weekly calls, and a roadmap to transfer your business from inside and out, just like they did at Varsity House Gym. Ready to stop guessing and start growing? Go to businessofstrength.com/attend and join the Strongest Year Project today. Wow. Yeah, no, I had first kind of come across this stuff, early on with, Morrow, obviously, which was kind of my... Mm-hmm. I had done my nutrition stuff at Berkeley, which was very, very FDA heavy. Fat's going to kill you. Carbs are 60%. And all I know was when I went to the NFL and I got hooked up with Morrow, I was super lunchy. And probably insulin resistant, 317 pounds, excess body fat, and Morrow introducing me to obviously what he called the Stone Age diet, which was Vince Gironda's approach. And would be the early pennings of paleo diet, and Art De Vany's name in the searches. I do remember, and I remember when you brought it up, I was like, dude, how do I know that name? And then I remembered because what triggered it was, remember Tony Horton's Muscle Confusion?
Yeah.
Yeah, he, like, all of that stuff kind of stemmed from Art De Vany's deal. And I think that there's a lot of this pieces. And as I went back and pulled his book out, I had to go up into the container to find it, and was going through his stuff. There's a lot of his information you can see. I mean, talking about lean body mass being the greatest predictor for health and wellness. I mean, you listen to that, and now that's like revolutionary. I mean, you get, Gabrielle Lyon, building her entire practice and talking about protein and, lean body mass and this. And I'm like, 25 years ago, Art De Vany wrote about this. So, I mean, there's still a ton of influence. And I think like going back to like, the paleo diet and you and Cordain and, Vince Guarana and these guys. And I mean, even to Morrow is the father of carb cycling. Everybody does some form of carb cycling. And that was really Morrow's contribution, and everything just kind of built upon that.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, there is so much stuff that like there were message boards again where Art would participate, and I'm going to sound like a huge dick here and I'll get burned down, but Art would be literally presenting pearls before swine. Like I think there was a really engaged group of people that really followed his work, and ever so often he would throw something out there about like the really difficult lives that women had during agricultural times with like the childbearing and nutrient poor diets and all this stuff. And he would get flamed by some gal. This happened like 3 times. And then he was like, fuck you guys. And he would just like disappear. And he would be gone for like 2 years, 5 years. Yeah, I was just ninja smoke bomb, boom. And it was the same. And again, this is where I'm going to get canceled or something. It was always some like harpy-esque woman who couldn't understand what the fuck he was saying and couldn't just like step back and like take the bigger picture. But he was a very prickly dude, and he just didn't suffer fools at all. And he was like, fuck you guys. I'm wealthy. I'm enjoy everything else that I do. And as soon as this interaction with you guys becomes onerous, then I'm out. And fortunately, I had his email and still managed to keep contact with him here and there. I was very sparing with it because I didn't want to become the annoying person ever. But yeah, he would just disappear for like 5 years.
One of my favorite Art De Vany concepts was the hunter-gatherer in a pinstripe suit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that as shaping like the broader ancestral health movement. Do you think that metaphor still applies today?
It's funny. I thought Lauren Cordain would get a Nobel Prize in medicine, like at some point. Like I thought that this concept would completely take over the mental space of like the ancestral health model, all the paleo diet, all that stuff. But the ancestral health model, evolutionary biology, it doesn't provide solid, concrete answers, but it is kind of the only place that you can go for asking good questions. And I really thought that those questions would lead to some massive impact. And it has had impact, but I feel like the ancestral health kind of concept, you have shit like the Liver King and stuff like that just made a mockery of it. And it kind of destroyed it. Like people kind of ran the other direction. A good friend of mine, Nick Norwitz, a brilliant kid, PhD from Oxford, Harvard MD. He's kind of prickly towards the ancestral health concept. And he when I was on his show, he acknowledged, he's like, it's a good place to start, but like, which we both fully agreed on. But even for him, he doesn't couch much in the beginnings with like, well, from an evolutionary biology perspective, what might we think about this? Like if we see like discordance, like disease, is all this obesity and everything, just normal? Or has it always been this way? And you start looking back, it's like, no, this is actually kind of a new feature of the world and whatnot. I think that, it's funny, and this is part of what I was talking about, like Art's impact. I think things like Whole 9 and even Whole 30? Diane Sanfilippo's gig, Whole 9, Whole 30, Balance Bites, those things went on to have really massive impact. And the operating system was basically this kind of ancestral health model. And they figured out ways of kind of couching it so that they could have a trait that's fine. Like that's totally legit. But those are probably the most successful examples of like legit kind of ancestral health, paleo diet type things, kind of going forward. But I see very few people couch things in those terms. I even have kind of shied away from doing it because to the degree I want to communicate with folks online, it just starts a fight almost immediately, or you start feeling Liver King-esque, and it's like, I don't know that I want to get into that.
I mean, the worst thing to happen to the paleo diet was one, like people like paleo treats and paleo chocolates and paleo this, and all of a sudden now you got something with 600 grams of sugar in it being called paleo. And,
right.
all of a sudden you got dudes showing up in loincloths and like all this just weirdness, kind of that like overshadowed the greatness of what it was. And I go back to, you had a excellent interaction with Dr. Michael Rose, and he made an interesting comment that I think about probably way more than I should, like I said, is if you're not looking at things through an evolutionary lens, you don't really understand like anything about it. Like you have to look at every sickness, health and wellness, everything through this ancestral lens. And if you don't, like there's no place to start and you have no place to necessarily go. So his comment was, with modern medicine, all we do now is we're just trying to like put a Band-Aid over the check engine oil light and just throw drugs at things through this better living through pharmacology, instead of taking a step back and looking through the ancestral lens and being like, okay, why is this happening? And more importantly, how do we fix it that doesn't look like a pharmaceutical intervention? And so whether it be within, the training space in terms of, you think about said specific adaptation to impose demands, forcing something into adaptation. All right, like why does this muscle adapt this way? Why does the body adapt this way? Well, look what happens over the life cycle of an athlete, not for a reason, but for a season where somebody's in their, teens and 20s and 30s. And what does that continue to look like into their 40s and 50s? And not attaching weirdness to it, which I had a funny blog post the other day about "Don't Be Weird," which was actually the name of my my nutrition talk for years ago. And somebody brought it up, and one of the guys in our Discord put my picture into AI, and it picked out this like kind of marbleized piece I put on social, what I thought was funny. But it really went back to this idea of like, you can do this without being weird. And it looks like, hey, this is just the food we eat. And I think you've done a great job of that. And I think I have too, where it's like, this is just how big, strong athletes eat. And this is how people eat, when you're not a little kid. And if you're searching for performance and you have so much experience in that deal, going and teaching the nutrition stuff for CrossFit, where you were trying to basically like hack the zone so these people weren't dying, and found, like Xing fat and this. And I mean, it was really a pretty ingenious thing that you did, but really just trying to focus on people where you're like, weighing and measuring is important if you're not eating food quality. If you're eating food quality, you don't have to be as precise and the margin of error increases. So why don't you just eat better? The age old, like, you can zone on beer, potato chips, and beef jerky. And, a lot of the information you dispelled, which to me felt very just intelligent and also just responsible. So,
well, and it was definitely inspired by Art's approach. Like it was deeply inspired by that. It's funny, even though I was technically, like I did a research fellowship with Lauren Cordain and everything, and spent way more face time with Lauren than I did Art. Art's thinking influenced me far more. All the nonlinear systems dynamics, and like it has made me look at like politics and energy and movies and all this other stuff in a way that, Lauren was good in the window that he was in, but Art again was just this polymath, and his it's this thing that comes back around: economics, thermodynamics, evolution. Like if you have some 101 level steeping in that stuff, it's almost like a superpower for understanding the world. Like you won't understand every little nuance of everything, but like there's a lot of stuff when it comes down the pipe that you're like, that's going to be bullshit. Like the meat alternative, like Impossible Foods and all that. When they were trying to hang their whole story on sustainability, I'm like, that's bullshit. Like you're never going to beat, unless you're on a spaceship between planets, you're not going to beat sunlight, grass, cows, rinse, lather, repeat. Like it's just not going to happen. And those things, $150 billion invested in that or something like that, maybe more than that. And it's basically a junk stock now.
I mean,
art really influenced all that stuff.
Your book, Sacred Cow, is with like I refer to Sacred Cow as if anybody wants to delve out into the internet and potentially run into interactions with people that involve food and nutrition, they need to have read Sacred Cow. And it's just being able to arm themselves. Like you think about muscle being armor. This is another thing I tell my kids. I'm like, one day you're going to journey into the world in terms of the social media and internet, and you're going to these interactions, and whether it be Reddit or Instagram, whatever it looks like, and you're going to need a certain amount of armor. You're going to need a certain amount of training, and there's a few different books that you need to read to understand this. And so I was kind of putting these books together, and one of them is Sacred Cow for any discussion that you have, because what's going to happen is you're always going to run into vegans or people that are these, overly, what's the word? Like putting so much importance on this idea that cows are the direct result of are resulting in climate change. I mean, all of this stuff that you dispel in that book was excellent. I mean, the other one's like Animal Farm. I told the kids, I'm like, if you could read Animal Farm, 1984, and we kind of like listed all these different books, but like you get a pretty good understanding of what's going on in the world. And more importantly, because the one thing that COVID showed me is and I think we felt this way too, there's a lot of disinformation. And we're being, polarized and pushed and cold and whatever you want to say by let's say different media outlets. I didn't realize the extent that it was all of them. And I think what COVID showed me was that like there is no finite amount. I mean, it's infinite. Everything is this, whether it be, my podcast or my YouTube or my Instagram being shadow banned for having people on like you and Sabine. And, we had Dr. Robert Clancy on, who's the immunologist from Australia, like having these individuals on, all of a sudden you're like, how did we only get 450 views when I was getting thousands? And you're kind of like, and somebody made a comment the other day, like, I can't believe this has more views. I'm like, yeah, I mean, there was a point where things just fell off the cliff, and I didn't realize, you think about like legacy media and, Operation Paperclip and, Mockingbird and all these, CIA stuff where, like they were like influencing, the CIA was going out and basically collecting dirt on these reporters so they could influence stuff. I mean, I was telling the girls at dinner the other night, I'm like, because they were asking about World War II and some things. And I was like, after World War II, all those Nazi scientists that were doing all those crazy experiments, we just brought them here and gave them new identities and let them continue their research for us. And they were like, what? And we pulled it up and they were like, heads exploded. I'm like, dude, like this is, and they couldn't believe it. They're like, there's no way. I'm like, I'm telling you, this is the truth. So I think for individuals that are going to delve out of the internet and might have an interaction with somebody who's on the other side, Sacred Cow is so important.
Oh, thank you. It's a pretty good anchor that gets thrown out there. It's interesting. I remember talking to Art about all of that stuff, like the sustainability side. And it's so interesting. And again, like it just speaks to how fucking smart this guy was. But he was like, it's pretty efficient using grains to fatten cows. Like at the end of the day, the input-output story is pretty efficient. If you want to do grass the whole way, that's fine too. But he was just basically like, this is the only thermodynamically intelligent way to produce food, this combination. Like, it's not going to be 100% Joel Salatin at a global level. It's not going to be 100%, Tyson meat or, whatever at the global level. If you want to, have any soil left to grow any food. Like, you have to reintegrate some of the holistic practices. And he said that in far fewer words than I did. And it was almost this dismissive thing. And it was like, it'll totally sort itself out. Well, and so even though what's funny about that is, as I've looked back, I think Sacred Cow was important for like giving some people, arming some people with some answers and stuff like that so they could feel better about things. But it's I'll bring up another controversial topic like the climate change deal. Bill Gates just popped up out of nowhere and he's like, it's not the existential threat that anybody thinks it is. We just need to manage things. And like, he's been beating this other drum for a long time, but literally thermodynamics, the doom predictions, Al Gore saying that New York would be underwater by like 2010 or something like that.
Yeah.
And like it hasn't. And Art was able to, I don't know if he just like super computed that stuff and just, I don't know how he did it, but he was just always right. Like he just, and on these like sustainability topics and everything, he was basically like, it'll sort itself out. Like thermodynamics can't be faked for an extended period of time. At some point it'll rear its head. And I think that's where like Europe, Germany, where it doubled down so hard onto like green energy and stuff like that. Like they're in a fucking mess right now.
Oh yeah, no, it crippled them.
Unmitigated mess. And you can have all these ideals around things, but there's just this kind of thermodynamic reality. And Art was so good at sorting through all that stuff. And people would bicker with him like over, say, like elite athletic performance, whether it was muscle mass or endurance or what have you, because people go looking for a guru. And he was basically like, look, what I'm giving you is minimum effective dose. Mm-hmm. You can be very fit, very strong, have good muscle mass with absolutely laughable amounts of time investment. And that's what I want. I'm an economist. This is what I'm trying to get. If you want to be a bodybuilder, go do that. But Art was also prickly enough that he would just berate people. He's like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to spend hours in the gym each week instead of minutes and whatnot? And people just didn't understand. He was kind of an iconoclast. And also he was pretty spot on with like the hierarchical sets and the alactic sets and stuff like that, and the reality that probably you get the bulk of the benefit from a set or two, occasionally three, and you probably don't want to burn that down all the time, unless you're really wired up in a particular way. And again, if you have these goals, and that was probably the only place that Art kind of ran afoul of people, was when somebody would want him to validate their kind of edge use case, situation, which may be totally valid, like doing arts programming for you at the peak of your NFL training probably wouldn't have been sufficient to do what you needed to do.
Sure.
But it could certainly inform a lot of it. Like you could, the hierarchical training, the alactic sets, different things like that. Like things like that are really valuable, but there's just a reality that to produce the muscle mass and the power generation necessary for playing in the NFL, it's a different level. And there's within that economic cost benefit story, there's a different equation that's involved there. And Art would have been prickly about it, and people didn't understand that. They couldn't read through that. It's like he had his way, and really you were really hard pressed to find a more economics based approach to training. I think Art massively influenced Greg Glassman's thinking. Like when you look at the way that Greg talked about things early on, it was shockingly similar to Art. And it may be that both of them were smart, both of them had an economics orientation, and so they are, convergent evolution, they arrived at the same stuff. But the fact that Greg was early in finding Art's material, I think that, it's kind of like syphilis on a college campus. Like you start reading Art's material and you can't help but be influenced by it. It's just so elegant and moving and everything, the way he describes stuff.
Yeah, no, he, like herpes on spring break. Art emphasized variety, randomness, and chaos as central to metabolic and physiological health. Do you think that, I'm going to answer yes, because I think most modern fitness programs have kind of ignored these ideas and everything. And we're probably a big part of this, in that, people want structure. People want to be like, hey, show me the directions. If I, go from 1 to 100 here in terms of assembling my IKEA table, at the end of this 100, I get something sturdy I can put in my living room. I think in the training space, a lot of people want that same too. I just want to follow this program and I want the end result. And I think it's put upon me and behooved upon me as the architect to be able to understand just enough consistency and theme, but add just enough randomness and, I guess you could say like variety so that people stay interested and you can continue to drive adaptation. And Mike, at the end of the day, you can probably just go and do the exact same workout every single day over and over again and get some decent results. But for most people, that's extremely monotonous and they will not adhere to that. So you have to be able to like add enough structure and enough like repeatedness so that they can see progress, but add enough variety and enough excitement and enough things to where, it's a little bit different. So you don't feel like it's Groundhog Day. And I feel Yeah. So he discussed chaos and randomness and all these indifferent, within health and, training. How do you think that's kind of evolved? Or do you think that we're not seeing that as much as he put emphasis on?
I think it's a tricky thing to pull off, and Art was great at doing it instinctively. And I think that there was more, like he deadlifted frequently, he squatted frequently, he would switch it up. He would do periods of time where he didn't do these things. He would throw med balls around and stuff like that. But I think just he had trained for years. I mean, he had lifted weights since he was like 16, and then he played semi-pro baseball and all that stuff. I think, when he was 62, he was 6'2", 215 pounds, and he was fucking jacked. Like, you see these older pictures of him, his delts are all capped and everything. And
you referred to him once as, I think he was probably even in his 70s, late 70s, I think you saw him in New York. And you made the comment that like you got done with your meeting, you like stepped off the curb and like ran across the street, and you said, it was like watching Superman's grandfather.
In the backstory with that is that we needed to cross the road. It was icy as fuck, and we had like dress shoes on because we had just been on like a ABC Nightline, and we were going to get some food. And like the crosswalk thing was counting down. I'm like, "Do you think we can make it?" And he was like, "Hell yeah, we can." And dude, he just bam. Shot out of a cannon, like icy and everything. And I was like, holy shit, man. And that's in my blog post. That's one of the stories I want to relate. So I appreciate you remembering that. But, on that training side, like CrossFit, I think was on to something with the, maybe a little more randomness than back and buys, chest and tries, rinse, lather, repeat, but also particularly with a neophyte trainer, if you see deadlifts once a month, like you're not going to make any progress. There's no motor learning, there's no overlay with stuff. I do think that the flip side is that people like you look at some of the Pavel-esque stuff, and I really respect Pavel Tsatsouline a lot, but like he'll get in these things where like all you need are like deadlifts and dips, and maybe for some people that's fine, like a real minimalist program, but you will adapt to that and also start heading into muscle imbalance pretty quickly. And I think that there's it's really hard to strike a good balance. That's why I think like your programming has been so insightful and impactful for people and some smart people in the space where there's enough consistency so you can keep driving forward. Like you want that, the big lifts to go, but then you do these little things that hit the multifidi and shit like that. And like you feel sore in this way that you're like, I can't even believe that thing made me sore the way that it did. Yeah. And it's integral so that you can then push the big lifts up. And I think Westside Barbell had a smattering of this. It's like, change your bench grip, change your bench angle, dumbbells, barbells, fat bars, skinny bars, bamboo, flexible bar. Like you could still bench all the time, but if it's exactly the same barbell, the same cadence, you lose the ability to adapt. And you also just invite these muscular imbalances that are kind of hard to deal with. And I think when you're catering to the masses, and again, it's like, the neophyte trainer versus the more advanced person, like how do you take a beginner and get them enough exposure so that they get good at squat, deadlift, bench, overhead press, chin up, doing a proper chin up, or it's scapular retraction and not, scapular protraction at the top of the movement and stuff like that. That takes some time. And I think that Art just instinctively, because he had trained for 70 plus years, like he just, it was woven into his DNA, and I think similar with you, but then for good or ill, you were foolish enough to want to educate the unwashed masses.
I
keep having that Groundhog's Day thing. And so you have to strike this balance of like, there's a certain number of new people coming in the funnel that literally don't know their head from their back end. And then you have people that are at this elite level that, and you have to strike this balance between the consistency of the beginner that they need and then introducing enough variety on the advanced person so they can get that final couple of percentage points of development. That's a massive bridge to build. That's a huge span to deal with.
I heard, obviously Art does use the term chaos, and especially in like the training and the metabolical health, physiological health. The only other person that I heard use that term, and it kind of sparked it was just kind of an interesting piece because I'd heard it through him, was actually Louis Simmons. He talked about a lot of the training they do. They would purposely put themselves into weird positions for the fact that, like, he called it chaos training, that like you're in a meet, something happens, like we're going to train. And that's where a lot of the chains and some of these odd lifts came from, was he called it, he's like, you never know what's going to happen. And, we call this chaos training. And like, hey, like a Zercher, you might be in this position, or we're going to, do this. And when he said chaos, I was like, man, that makes so much sense. And then as I went back and read and I was looking at it, I was like, this is a lot what Art De Vany talked about. You might be in a situation where you have to pick something up or move something or do something. And, if you're so used to always deadlifting with a completely flat back and you got to go pick up a heavy stone or a 300-pound sack of something, you're not going to be able to do it perfect. You have to be able to train for and not to say unknown and unknowable, because when I hear it, I kind of vomit a little because I think of Glassman, but you never know what's going to present itself. I'll just give you an example. I was fortunate. I got invited to go on this thing called the Unreal Adventure, and it was an off-road trip. And, they give you a location, you show up with your truck, and then you drive around for 7 days and hit all these off-road things and break things. And there were a couple situations where I was in something and something needed to be done, and I was really glad that I was strong. Like, hey, like that rock's in the way. Oh, well, that rock doesn't look that big. And I like pick it up and throw it. Or, hey, I got to get this tire in the back and different things, and just kind of like throw it in. And people are like, you just fucking threw a 300-pound tire. I'm like, yeah, because I lift fucking weights. And, I don't get hurt on this stuff because we add these elements into the training space. But like, there's been numerous times where I've been like, oh, thank God. Like, thank God I'm strong. Like, this is, because if I wasn't, I'd be stuck, and I'd be in a situation where I wouldn't be able to get out of this. But because I'm stuck and kind of stupid, I can probably work my way through this. Right.
And, it's kind of cool because you early on focused on the power athlete angle. And I remember, you sharing the story of GG, like, nobody wants to be elite. They want to be powerful, and it's like, yeah, no shit. But,
that was right before he went face down in the fucking salad.
God, that was great. I want to go back to the 4 seasons in Scottsdale just to see if I can like pull in some of that vibe. It's just,
I took the kids there every year since then. We haven't been in a couple of years, but every time we go to Scottsdale, we stay there. And like, I literally like we go to the kids pool and I like look at that adult pool down there where we were. And I'm like, that's where it happened.
So much shit went down. But Art was obsessed with power and power production. And he understood super early on, again, that the thing that degrades quickest with aging is those type 2B, 2X motor units. Yeah. And he was pretty obsessed with, if you did nothing else, stoke the flame under that. And he was interesting in that part of his critique of more modern training modalities, this would be a good question for you. His thought on it was that given enough volume, it becomes endurance training at some point, even if it's heavy and all that type of stuff. And you start forcing this fiber type conversion from, the legit 2B to more of a 2A, a little bit more endurance oriented. Yeah, maybe it's strong, but it's not that just like, bullet crack type explosiveness. And that was part of his push for like pretty minimal volume, and he mentioned some studies like if you cast a muscle, it loses all the endurance and it reverts to these 2B fiber types are more predominant. And I had noticed also just observationally, we would try to be really consistent in the gym and then would get busy, maybe wouldn't train at all or with the consistency that I had before. Lo and behold, go back in the gym and, would PR and do really well. And what was hard before was relatively easy. And some of that is probably just, recovery and adaptation. But I think some of it was this, fiber type shifting. Like, what do you think about that? And I assume there's probably a big individual story with that, like the big monkey, small monkey, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, two things happen as we age, right? We lose the ability to recruit motor units and we lose mitochondrial density, right? So, I mean, that's where the tip of the hat to developing a large aerobic base. And I, skewed my fucking nose at that and gave that to my finger for a number of years until I realized that this is a real deal. That, having a big aerobic base helps with autonomic systems and just helps you to be healthier. And, everything from insulin sensitivity to sleep. I mean, all the autonomic stuff just looks better when you have a high aerobic base. The ability to recruit motor units really just comes down to, the joke that I used to say that old man Zenga said, don't lift weights like old people, have sex slow and careful. You have to be violent and try to break these motherfuckers. And I laughed so hard. One, I'm super sad George is dead, but the amount of like funny quips that he gave me while I was, a young impressionable person have carried me for a number of years. But that ability to produce force and recruit motor units drastically decreases with age. Now, I don't know if it's a Michael Rose deal where at some point at the age of 40, you have to return back to your ancestral diet kind of deal, or is it a hormonal deal? Because I remember I was out at Westside and I was talking to Louis and we were looking at Prilipin's chart. And, I was like, it's, 1 to 10 in this kind of rep range, ideally 7. And, those guys only did 4 reps. How come? And he's like, because their test levels are so much higher than yours. And his assumption, and basically he figured out, was the more testosterone these guys took, the less reps they needed. So if you were on 3 grams a week at test and you needed, if you look at Prilipin's table, 1 through 10, 7 being optimal, these guys might need 4 because going to 7 was going to hurt them because they were so dynamic and their nervous system was so heightened. That was also his reasoning for why female athletes could handle a higher percentage of their 1RM for multiple reps. He's like, how many times do you think you could squat 90%? I'm like, I don't know, 3 or 4. He's like, I got chicks in here who can squat it 15 times. Does it mean that their 90% is their 90%? I'm like, no. It just means they don't have a true 1RM because their nervous system's not as adapted. It's not as in sync because of hormones, because of testosterone. And I was like, have you ever tested? He goes, yeah, we've given girls testosterone and they revert on the other side of this thing. So I think it's a hormonal thing, androgens. That, as you start to age, that hormonal profile decreases. I think eating a westernized diet that, is low in fat and all these other things, and they just don't have as healthy an androgen profile. And the other major one is all these environmental toxins, all these things. I mean, to this day, I remember 25 years ago, having a conversation with Tom Inclin where he's like, the food today, and this is 20 plus years ago, is not nearly as nutrient dense as it was 100 years ago. He goes, the food that we would have eaten 100 years ago, he goes, would have made us way more jacked, way stronger, and way healthier for the fact that it was just much more nutrient dense. And he goes, when you couple a lifetime of eating food that is substantially not as nutrient dense, and you add all the environmental things, everything from, gasolines and toxins and leads and all these other things that go out into the world, we're not nearly as robust. And he told me 25 years ago, every generation going forward was going to be a lesser version of the generation previous. And he goes, you look at like the greatest generation and the quiet generation and even the baby boomers, and he goes, really the dropping off of that thing was, kind of Gen X. And then he goes, and then you get into millennials and this, he goes, we saw this and it kind of did this and now it's this. And he's like, the kids today will not be as durable as their grandparents. They won't live as long. And I thought to Tom, I'm like, you're full of shit. And he goes, he was in, Penn State's lab for strength and conditioning. And he knew, he's, Zadaskorsky and whatnot. And also take it a step back where you talked about that conversion of fast twitch to slow twitch muscle fibers with extended volume. I first read about that in Zadaskorsky's book, Science and Practice. He has a piece in there, and the reason that they only periodized and used circuit training, which looked like, high intensity interval training where they would do, periods of time, something like a fight gone bad, for example. And they did those within small blocks, but they knew that too much of that training caused a conversion of fast twitch to slow twitch muscle fibers to be able to handle that form of training. So they knew it was good for building a GPP block, but you had to do it. You had to move on to more advanced training. And when I had the opportunity to talk to, whether it be Charlie Francis, who, I was very fortunate to interact with, he talked about, GPP and strength and all that. And he goes, all that stuff's important right up to the point it's not. And how do you find out it's not is when it all of a sudden adversely affects speed. So and then I take another step back and I go back to Zangus, and, there I'm at 15, 16 years old, and he's talking about, break these weights, don't lift weights like old people have sex. But what he was really talking about was compensatory acceleration, theorized by Dr. Fred Hatfield, who was on this podcast, God rest his soul, who is another fucking titan of this thing. But Fred,
Right.
Fred and I had some great conversations, and he said the same thing. He's like, his mechanical advantage increases, so does speed, because of that intent and that force that you're driving into the bar is what activates. He called them white muscle fibers, but they're really the motor units that we're talking about here. You have to fight to activate those things, and the only way you do it is by over speeding this stuff. Plyometrics, jumping. So I think what happens, and I thought I coined this, but I'm sure a million people have. It's like, we don't get old and stop training and lifting weights. We stop lifting weights and training, and that's when we get old. So, Art was a great example from that. And I remember when you told me Superman's grandfather, that like stuck with me. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck. Like that's, and even Dr. Sean Baker, we had a pretty good chat at Sornex, and we sat at dinner, and we were talking a little bit about his training. And, he was talking about, the jumps and the training he's doing, that he felt that it's like, it's his fountain of youth. And I was like, yeah, we've been talking about this for like 20 fucking years, if not longer.
I know,
and I'm so stoked that he's so excited about it. I was, kind of like when you see somebody that excited about it, it makes you excited. But I feel that there is I'm not going to say training rubric, but like in a way it is of like, like for longevity and being able to, sustain and fight off all this stuff. I think that there is a training that really tips its hat to training for athleticism, being dynamic and moving fast and using compensatory acceleration and X, Y, and Z axis and different primal movements and, sagittal, frontal, and transverse plane, and being able to kind of rinse and repeat, and train with frequency, train with not, like being able to vary it enough. Some days it's 3, some days it's 4, and then continue to use something to foster and develop athleticism, which is what we've done with jiu-jitsu, where now all of a sudden you're using the training, and now you're in a situation where you're in different, we're always so used to being upright, but now you're in this kind of like gyroscope, and it's forcing you to have to solve problems in real time that combine not only flexibility, athleticism, conditioning, strength, muscle, isometric, concentric, eccentric. And now I'm trying to navigate this other individual in kind of an open loop environment. And it's forcing me to make these decisions in real time, which help with, neurological, decreasing neurological aging, but also allowing me to stay, somewhat pliable and durable. So I feel that the Michael Rose thing on his talk on fruit flies from AHS, that was another fucking light bulb moment for me. The idea at 40, you have to return back to that ancestral diet. We were fortunate that we've been eating the ancestral diet for a number of years. And, still to this day, what did I buy? Yesterday I bought steaks, I bought, sweet potatoes, I have eggs, we picked up some raw milk. My buddy's wife made me a huge big thing of like homemade sourdough bread that I'll have a little bit of. All of these kind of like, whether, we have kimchi and sauerkraut and sour pickles and, like drink coffee. I don't drink, I do like one Zevia a day is kind of my cheat deal. Like I call it my my cigarette, like I get to have like one heater. It's like my Zevia, but like eating that way, it's what humans do. And to me, it's weirder when I see that people don't eat like that. It's also weird to me when I see that people don't train the way they do, or that the way that we do, or they say things like, oh, I just don't think I could do something like jits, or I don't want to compete in anything. Like that feels so weird to me. So I think what's funny is like we've kind of gone in this direction where we're like, no, this is longevity, this is health, this is wellness, this is how we're supposed to live. How you're living isn't how people are supposed to live. And the worst part about it is, I think many years ago, we were trying to run into the burning house and pull people out. Now I'm just standing out from the street roasting marshmallows. And I'm like, I don't care to save anybody and pull them out of the burning building. If they're in the burning building and they want to get burned up, that's fine. I'm just going to sit out here. And if you want to come out and roast a marshmallow, I'm happy to do it. And I think what happened to you and to me and, Art De Vany and these people, where you're like, you know what, the information is the information, whether or not you want to believe it or not. And I have, Power Athlete has delivered at least one training program every single day since March 31st, 2009. And at least one, up to 9 we've done, without break. So we've delivered like thousands of programs, taught hundreds of seminars to literally tens and tens of thousands of athletes and have all this data sets. And after a while, when you just have that much information presented to you, it looks really clear. It's like the Neo in the Matrix. It's kind of like, for you, with, the ancestral diet and the paleo stuff, like, people just tend to be healthier. It tends to fix problems that, modern medicine and pharmacology just throw fucking pills at. And that to me is insanity, because that's not how we should live. My son is a type 1 diabetic, and I see what he has to go through each day. And like in the back of my head, and we talked about it on the car ride yesterday. Hey Dad, how much longer do you think until we cure diabetes? And I'm like, you know what? You have some of the smartest people on the planet as your dad's friends, and they're all thinking about this. You got Andrew Kapornik, who's probably the top, diabetes researcher, who's literally like your mentor, who's like, texting me every week. And you got Rob, you got Parsley, you got, Doc Yu, Adil Khan, Sabine Hazen. You have all of these people that you don't even know that are like literally the baddest fucking people on the planet, who I consider to be the Avengers. I'm like, those are your people. Those are your uncles and your aunts, and those people are working for you. And like, Sabine will text me and she's like, how's the boy feeling? What about this? What about this? And, same with people. And it's like, I tell Cashy, I'm like, I know you don't see it, but I was like, the impact that you've made within my friend group, like it's like, those are the people that I'll go to war for. And and I was like, we're going to solve this thing, and it's going to come because of these smart people working in this capacity for you. But in the meantime, we know how to eat, we know how to train, we know what life looks like, and the life that a lot of these people are living is not one that I want. And it's so interesting when these people argue against me. I'm like, no, you're fine. You continue to eat this way. Believe me, I don't care. But like, don't try to tell me like that you're doing what you think you are or is right, because I just don't buy it. And you know what? I don't really give a fuck.
Right. Yeah. And Art arrived there as usual ahead of all of us.
So how did art influence your thinking around hormesis? So like the idea of like brief, intense stressors as a path to adaptation, right? Like, we've talked about it here, but like, you think about his training, but does it extend into other parts? Is there a place for that in nutrition? Is it in wellness and education? I just wonder if that idea like permeates past just within training, because it sounded like, go on.
He, I'm pretty sure was the person that put that on my radar, like late 90s. I don't believe that I had heard of it before that. And it influences everything from training, studying. You need a mild stressor so that you can adapt and, stimulate, don't annihilate type stuff. Yeah. It is influenced everything. And the flip side is that a dynamic, adaptive system that isn't stressed will fail. This is one of these kind of interesting things that I don't think, when people talk about, like this aging kind of element, like part of what's happening with exercise and effective aging is that you're sending a signal to our bodies, to this adaptive system that's like, hey, we're still in the fight. Like, here's a stress, you need to adapt to it. And without that, the entropy, the disorder just keeps creeping in at the margins, and you lose the muscle mass, you lose the appropriate or more desirable hormonal signaling. And so I think that hormesis, when you think about food, whether it's coffee or green tea or berries or what have you, like those anthocyanidins and berries are good for us, but they're good in large part because they're a mild stress first. And then there's adaptive characteristics. They feed the gut bacteria and things like that. But when we absorb these things into our system, it's a little bit of a stressor that then causes adaptations that may promote anti-carcinogen effects, antioxidant effects, but it's after being a pro-oxidant effect. Like it causes an oxidative insult and then the body adapts to that. So like that hormetic stress story, again, I think that Art was the first person that I ever learned that concept from. And it informs, damn near everything that I do now. Like I'm learning Italian at almost 54 and I'm a year down range. And, like some days I'll push really fucking hard. Other days it's a little peppering. So I even kind of periodize the way that I do that. And I'm getting okay at it.
Nice.
I'm like a year down range, and Nikki and I can carry on conversations when we go to Italy. I can navigate myself around, order food, explain that I have celiac, tell a few very poor jokes, and within like 2 years, I'll be conversationally fluent and able to watch TV programs in it and everything. But even the way that I've tackled that, it's not like the same rote deal every single day. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's 10 minutes. It varies in between that. I try to pepper it in often and vary the intensity there, and all of it's informed by these early ideas of hormetic stress that Art shared with that evolutionary fitness essay.
Yeah, I've been doing Portuguese, so I'm surrounded by Brazilians, and I don't like the fact that they have these conversations and then they all laugh and then they don't like translate it back. And so Arash and I were like, this is fucking bullshit. So we kind of challenged each other. So I've been literally just like, I have like 1,000 flashcards, and I think I gave myself to February with the flashcards. And then after that, I have a tutor once a week, and then it goes to 2 days a week. And so I kind of like laid out, I reached out to this tutor, and they were like, hey, here's all the flashcards you need. Like, this will just give you a basic vocabulary, and then we can kind of get into this thing. And so, yeah, no, I I'm with you. I just was like pissed off that these guys are having conversations. So fuck those guys. The fact that they speak 2 languages, and I was like, man, you guys didn't even graduate from elementary school, but you guys are good at jiu-jitsu. So that's the shit talking I give them. Art advocated not setting goals and instead focusing on process and play. How, did that shape the early days of NorCal strength conditioning into what you guys do today? Because I remember you telling me one day he's like, what'd you do for your training? He's like, I just went outside and laid out in the sun. And he goes, I just enjoyed nature, and I decided I wasn't going to train today, but that was my training. And I remember you told me that, and I'm like, not everything has to be physical in training. Like some days, you just go outside and sit down and get some sun on your face, and maybe that's the best you do for the training. And I think that that was an interesting piece for me. Do you think that play and that idea of not setting goals, because they kind of juxtaposed and kind of opposite in terms of running a gym, because people are like, what's my goal? I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to squat 300 pounds. I want to do this, and then everybody's so goal oriented. And he kind of spoke out against having goals and just focus on the process, that it's not the destination. It's the road getting there. And the idea of keeping play and, keeping things somewhat lighthearted. How did you guys incorporate that? Or if you did, or did you find a way to?
Yeah, it's funny. I think, and I wonder about this sometimes. I was never a professional athlete. I was never a SEAL. I've had a modicum of success in some areas, a couple of New York Times bestselling books, a couple other things. And I am different in that, so we have, as a family, we've been sitting down and we've been delineating a family theme for the year. Our theme is laugh more, dance more, travel more, I think this year. And so Nikki and I are taking some dance classes, and we're just trying to have more fun and do more things. We've been in a grind of building businesses and stuff like that. But even when I did, I guess, internally have a goal of reaching New York Times bestseller, when I understood what the numbers were and what my reach was, I'm like, I think I could do that. But it was really just I was happy when I achieved that, but it wasn't my being was wrapped up in the achievement of that thing, getting my black belt. It's been kind of this thing that's like, yeah, it's in the background. Like if I don't die and I don't quit, someday I'll get a black belt. But I wasn't wrapped around the axle of like belt advancements and stuff like that. I just really focused on getting better, a little bit better, enjoying the experience and whatnot. And I think it's going to sound weird, but compared to a lot of the kind of like Anthony Robbins-esque people where it's like, you got to delineate that goal and climb that mountain and all this stuff. I see a lot of people, maybe they do experience success, but they, once they hit that success, then there's like this hollow void that's left on the backside. Yeah. It's like, well, you just need to pick another goal and you daisy chain the goals together. But I see people go through these extreme highs and lows. They get their black belt and they're like, I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing anymore. The real big one is like the blue belt. It's like, well, I got my blue belt. Like that seemed unachievable. And then they get it and then they just drop off because like, it's still fucking hard. Yeah. Like it's harder, if anything, once you get your blue belt because you have more expectations, you have a bigger target on your back and everything. And so I think that was Art, I think studied some Zen, and he incorporated that into his approach to life, which was just like the work is the point. If you achieve these accolades and everything, that's great. And you should definitely enjoy them. And you don't, I think one of the difficulties I have around the kind of Zen Buddhist approach is it's almost like you should have already died. It's like, don't be attached to anything. Don't love anything. Yeah. It's like the fucking Jedi and the reason why that all went bad. It's like, well, you do want to love, you do want to be passionate about things and whatnot. But I think if you get overly attached to that, and maybe you were an elite athlete, you've done lots more stuff. I've done work within the special operations community. You've done a lot more than I have, but I see a lot of those people kind of psychologically broken when that train is gone. They haven't been able to find the next phase of work, and not necessarily goal oriented, but like, what is the thing that I'm just putting my mind towards? Like you weld and you do jujitsu and you're studying a language and you're being a dad. And like, there's all this stuff that you do and you seem really enriched and rewarded with that. And the interesting thing about the SEALs is that there's only about 10,000 of them around the world now at this point, that are, alive at any given point. There's a remarkably disproportionate number that are, super high net worth. There's 60% of them or something are like, super high achievers, multiple degrees, all that stuff. And then there's like the other one is like they're living under a bridge and there's just no middle ground. Like they're either like mega high achievers or they've just fallen off the map. And I think sometimes that overemphasis of goal setting, it's within that kind of Zen, Alan Watts, Taoist kind of thing. Like it's a falsehood in some ways. Like, if you want to get really big, strong, jacked, whatever, relative for what your genetics are, then you just learn to love lifting.
Sure.
And like, and it's, and you do set some goals. It's like the first time you ever bench 300 pounds is like a big fucking deal. It's like you will never forget that day in your life. It's seared into your memory forever. The first time you squat with 4 plates on the bar, 405, and you break these benchmarks, they're pretty big deals, but I think people do get there where they're like, I want to lift these numbers, do that stuff. But I think that those are oftentimes then the folks that say like you're on the downside, like you're turning 50 in not too long. I'm going to be 54 next weekend. I just like lifting. I like going out there and seeing what I could do. Yeah. And I occasionally get a near-term PR But it's like, well, what's the heaviest overhead press I've had in the last 2 years? It's not the heaviest overhead press I've had in my life. That is in the rearview mirror so far. I can't.
Well,
it's in another time zone.
I look at like today, like I PR'd it today, like and if I lifted this tomorrow, there'd be a PR tomorrow because the fact that I did it. So like people are like, "What's?"
Yeah.
I'm like, PR like today, or is it like an all-time PR? I think people get so wrapped around the axle on who they were, not necessarily who they are today. And I think, oh shit, did I unplug this? Oh, hold on. Sorry, I stepped on the cord. I think people get so wrapped around the axle on who they used to be, and they're in this constant, what is it? Comparison's a thief of joy. And as you were talking, I kept thinking about Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. And this idea that, like, what is it that defines you? And like, I think for everybody, they have to make that decision. For me, the experience of doing something has always been much more rewarding than actually the execution of this. Like, I'll just give you an example. So I went on that trip with that truck. I spent 3 years building that thing. And then I got done with it. And I went on this trip and now what? And I realized that like I like the process of training. I like the process of building and doing something, and I like all the stuff that's encased within that. And then as soon as you reach the goal, you're kind of like, huh. And so like my wife's, hey, you got to get this done and this done and this done. And I'm like, yeah, but when we get everything done, that means that we sell the house and leave. And I'm not ready to leave yet. So like, I can't get all this stuff done. And she's like, why is it that you can't get anything done until right before we sell it? And then we get to just enjoy the house the way it is for a little bit. And I'm like, because I'm a process driven person. Like, I'm not an outcome driven person. And, and I think that's what happens with the training. That if you're outcome driven, it's, you feel very unfulfilled when you reach it. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you fall in love with process, and I did a talk at Sornex about this, that, there's two types of people. There's process driven and there's outcome driven. And I didn't, the analogy I gave was, Victor, who's, obviously the top ultra in the world, went through kind of like a weird deal where he got invited to go to this like super Grand Prix deal. And he and Marigali ended up in the final. And Marigali got this like little bullshit sweep on him. And instead of like standing, Victor kind of like tried to go underneath, and he ended up getting on top and got like an advantage. And then stalled, and he ended up losing out. And the check was like 40 grand. So it was a pretty decent amount of money. And so he was pretty down. I remember I saw him. I went in like, the next day into the office, and I saw him, and he's pretty down. And I was like, shut the door. I'm like, what are you down for? He's like, well, I lost. And, this. And I was like, did you think it was going to be easy? Did you think that he was just going to roll the fuck over? That guy gets paid too. And I was like, and when did we become outcome driven? Like, we're process driven people. This is a process to greatness. And this little like stumbling thing isn't it isn't defining you. This is just going to be merely just a line item in the book on your road to greatness. So like, get the fuck out of your head and let's go. Like, did you, like this is, the same thing in the NFL. You get 16 games, and, you got a lot of different plays, and, and I go back and look and say, hey, you know what? I did good this one. What was the process to getting there? Like, that one play did not define me. And, we had a lot of different opportunities. So I think what we've come, and I blame this on social media a lot, is that there's this idea of like, well, like, a lot of people use social media as a way to kind of flex. Like, here's all the cool shit I have. Here's my house. Here's my car. Those are very like outcome things. Like, okay, you did something to purchase that. Great. Or did you really purchase it, or are you just leasing it? Like, I don't fucking know. Right. Like, it's just a lot of stuff. And every time I see all that stuff, I think two things. One, I think of my time at Berkeley when I was a huge Jack Kerouac fan. I lived on Derby Street, basically one street over from where Kerouac lived. And we used to, I used to work security at a club that was really on Columbus, right near the City Lights bookstore, where he would, all the beatniks would go talk. So I would go in there before work and like read the books and just like soak in this beatnik, And, on the road, he wrote, if you own a rug, you own too much. And then you take it a step further into, Fight Club, and, where he talks about the stuff you own ends up owning you. And like those ideas of like, accumulating shit. And then, I'll take it even a step further. My old neighbor, who was a real piece of shit, he was like 96 and died. And the day he died, it was funny. I was down in the pasture doing something. I saw this huge rattlesnake, and I fucking killed it. And I like had this moment where I was like, I bet you that old dude dies today. And I took the rattlesnake up, cut the rattler, put it in my pocket, and I basically took it up and I basically hung it on his fence. And then sure enough, I got a phone call that he had died that day. And I was like, I did it. I knew he died. I saw that rattlesnake, and I hadn't seen a rattlesnake in a long time. We'll see him down at the creek, but like not there. And then he died. And the very next day, a massive fucking truck pulled up and dumped like a huge trash, what do you call it? Like a dumpster, like on the front.
Yeah.
And they threw all of his shit away. Like all the stuff he had collected, they literally were just coming out in droves, just throwing it all away. And I'm like, so what happens is you live this entire life, you amass all this shit, like stuff that you think is so cool and all this, and all that happens is you die and somebody has to come and throw it all away. And like that was like those two moments of like Jack Kerouac to, Tyler Durden, to like seeing that was like so impactful, where I was like, you know what? And then even thinking about my dad as my dad was passing away, when I saw him before he passed, we were sitting there kind of talking about all the good times that we had and all the fun things we got to do and all the adventures we'd been on. And it was like, Dad, like, what do you think about this? Or like, is there anything left to do in this? And he was like talking about like trips we took and adventures we went on. It wasn't like, I wish I had bought another Rolex. What I needed was another English suit, or like, he was like, like, so when I got a new contract in the NFL, the first thing I bought my dad a Porsche. He had bought me a car, and I always told him, one day, Dad, I'm going to one up you. And dude, literally I slid those keys across and I bought him a badass twin turbo Porsche. And he was like he was like, like, the Porsche was fun to drive. He goes, the fact that like you bought it for me and I could brag to everybody was 1,000 times better than anything else. And so as you kind of get into this kind of like later stage of life, like, we're not 20 years old anymore. You're looking around and you're like, does any of this stuff really make me happy? No, it's about, like you said, it's about, learning Italian, going out and having a dance lessons with your wife, having a much more rich experience for your kids. I mean, it's so funny, man. Like, this morning, Kate and I were talking, and she was at Jamie's basketball, and one of the dads that was there told her that the Native Americans called Austin like the home of sickness, that nobody lived here because everybody that lived here got sick, so they would only travel through. And they related it to different mold and things. And Kate was like, have you ever heard this? I'm like, all I know is Rob and Nikki were sick the entire time they were here and couldn't get the fuck out of this
and
place.
Our kids.
And the kids. And then it was funny. She said that. And then I was like, oh shit. And that's kind of when I reached out. But I was like thinking about it, and I'm like looking at her, and she's like, man, we've like, think of the amount of sickness and illness that we've had. She's like, you're the only one that hasn't. I'm like, yeah, not yet. But yeah, I mean, I think there's places where people feel happy and healthy and safe and this, and but I don't know if accumulating more stuff has ever made anybody happy. I think the intrinsic pride of learning to speak a language at 54, getting your black belt. I mean, all of these things are things that nobody can buy for you. It's kind of like being fit and having a good body, right? Like I always joke, dude, like being in shape, and I told the kids this, being jacked and in shape is the world's greatest flex because you can't buy it. You have to go out and do it. I mean, you can take drugs. I mean, there's a million different things you can do to assist in it. But at the end of the day, you have to do the work. Clothes you can buy. And I even told them, I was like, I dated a really special girl named Erin Belger. When I was playing in the NFL, she ran track at Cal, and she kind of grew up like, not with a ton. And so she used to shop at thrift stores. She could wear guys' clothes and stop traffic. And I remember thinking, like, if you're good looking and have a good body, it does not matter what the fuck you own. She would wear guys' jeans and t-shirts, and literally cars would wreck in front of her. And like, that was, and I remember telling him, like, and I made a joke to her one time, and she's like, you know what? I just kind of figured all that clothes and makeup and all that shit was for girls that like weren't in good shape and weren't really that pretty to begin with. And I was like, God damn it, this girl's living like fucking orders of magnitude farther than we are. But like that idea of like, personal relationships, and having like, good friends and good laughs and fun dinners and, fun food, and like all these things are just great indicators of like, mental health and that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like, I don't know if buying another car is gonna, like, oh, what do you think about this? I'm like, I've already owned everything. Like, I'm happy to drive a pickup truck. And I think like the idea of like owning more stuff and just being, you know, more grounded within it. I feel like people go in two directions, especially as this kind of age where they have money in their pocket and they want to buy all the stuff they never have. And then you have like people like me where I'm like, I don't want any less shit. I don't want to die and have anybody have to throw my stuff away. But what I would like to is I would like to have way more adventures. And whatever those adventures look like, you know, and I'd love to get a black belt in jits. Part of the reason I had my knee fixed was that I couldn't bend my knee, and I was like, you know, always knee cutting to the right. And, you know, if I was playing knee shields, I was always on my right side trying to hide it. And so all my jiu-jitsu came into this idea that I was just hiding my knee. And I remember like having this like existential crisis of like, you either got to go fix this thing or you can't do this, because if you do it half-assed, you're not going to be happy, and you're going to be literally watching your guard get passed, because people know this, because now all of a sudden they know, fuck, he can't go this way, his knee's bad, I'm going to do this, and I can't get into these positions. And so part of the reason where I went and I got my knee cut and fixed, the doc's like, this is going to be really painful. I'm like, well, the pain of like sucking at jiu-jitsu and like not being athletic is 1,000 times worse than any fucking pain that you could do. So split it open, do your worst, doc. And yeah, I mean, that's the idea that, you know, I'm going to like, you know, live a life that, you know, when you do pass, that two dipshits are going to get on a podcast and talk about how influential you are. I mean, they always think that, you know, the mark of an individual is not by what he does, but how he influences people. And that influence happens after he passes. You know, like, you know, did you throw a big enough rock in to create enough waves? And I think what's, you know, what's been extremely nice about, you know, sitting here and talking about Art is how influential he was. And, you know, the fact that he passed away and here we are talking about him is a great indicator that, you know, he lived a great life and influenced people in a positive way.
Yeah, without a doubt. And his son contacted me the day that he died, and choking up a little bit with this, but I made enough of an impact on him that it was front of mind for them to communicate that to me. So, yeah.
Well, Robbie, you are, and I don't give this out just easily. You are one of my best friends and one of the best people I know in this world. And, you know, so, dude, anytime I get a chance to hang out with you in person or on the podcast, and now I'm going to tear up like a bunch of fucking douchebags, fucking criers. But, you know, I mean, it's, yeah, I mean, his ripple, I see it everywhere. And whether or not people know it or not, or care to acknowledge it, isn't as important that we know, you know. And I've long said, you know, I stand on the shoulders of giants. You know, I have been successful because I just happen to have the coolest Rolodex and the best friends. And I think Art's stuff was extremely impactful. And you know, it's the world's better for him being in it. And you know, his influence is still felt. And you know, I'm sad that he passed, but he lived to be 89 and he kicked ass. And
it was a good run. And
to quote my mom, my mom's 86. And my mom told me, how much longer do I have to do this shit? And I told her, until somebody decides that you don't. And she's like, fuck. And so, I mean, he lived a great life and, you know, super impactful. And, you know, I'm sad he passed, but I'm definitely happy for the contribution and the direction that he drove it.
Yeah. And maybe one final bow to put on all that, his health span and lifespan were very tightly synced. You know, it was in talking to his son, Brandon, this last year, there was some significant decline, both physically and cognitively. But it was about 9 months, you know, out of a nearly, you know, 90-year-long life. And even what Brandon said with that cognitive decline, there was just clearly some gaps in there. But if you got Art onto a topic that he was excited about, he could go on, and it's super high detail and whatnot. And so, you know, he was physically, emotionally, psychologically really engaged right up to the end, which that was really the whole thing that he sold the whole way was trying to marry that health span, lifespan, you know, curves and make them as tightly, push them out, like push them out there a bit, but then have them marry together so that there wasn't a decade of decline ahead of, you know, demise.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good place to wrap it up, dude. So I appreciate your time. And if for those of you guys that are listening that don't know who Art De Vany is, pull yourself out of a fucking hole. Google his name. Go and he has a bitchin' book, but really where it starts is you can download his Evolutionary Fitness. It's a PDF online. I think the one that I looked at today was like from 2000. So it's like Rob said, 21, 24 pages. Go through, read it, and you'll see a lot of what the world is pushing out in terms of like health and wellness and this hormesis. So I think it's pretty amazing stuff to see.
Yeah, and that updated one, most folks will find is 2011, but just keep in mind that thing hit the internet for the first time in 1995.
Wow.
So,
Fuck.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, dude, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Power Athlete Radio. This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. And now back to the show. Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by ko-fi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.